So I remember when Tom Cruise did this video, he did this interview with Matt Lauer, and he was against using psychotropic drugs, right? Here, listen to it.
Here we are today, where I talk out against drugs and psychiatric abuses of electric shocking people, okay, against their will, of drugging children with them not knowing the effects of these drugs. Do you know what Adderall is? Do you know Ritalin? Do you know now that Ritalin is a street drug? Do you understand that?
The difference is this was not against her will, though. But this wasn't against Brooke's will.
Matt, I'm asking you a question.
I understand there's abuse of all of these things.
No, you see, here's the problem. You don't know the history of psychiatry. I do. All it does is mask the problem, Matt. And if you understand the history of it, it masks the problem. That's what it does. That's all it does. You're not getting to the reason why. There is no such thing as a chemical imbalance. I'm saying that drugs aren't the answer, that these drugs are very dangerous. They're mind-altering, antipsychotic drugs. And there are ways of doing it without that so that we don't end up in a brave new world.
Yes, there are abuses.
So what Tom Cruise is saying, there's a way to treat people who have depression and other problems without using these psychotropic drugs.
Jimmy.
Spoiler alert, he was right, but I'm gonna, because there's a new study out. But go ahead, Kurt, what?
Okay, when this first came out, because I remember on Conan they made fun. They had like Mayor McCheese, and he was going, "You're being McGlib," and I remember hearing this played a lot. The part that stuck out to me that I don't remember from hearing hundreds of times was him mentioning Adderall and Ritalin, which are are speed. It's funny when that clip went around, they kept Adderall and Ritalin's name right out of it.
Yes.
And they only focused on the part he said after that. And
yes.
I never noticed that until just now.
And he was right. He's right about this. Let's keep going.
And yes, maybe they've gone too far in certain areas. Maybe there are too many kids on Ritalin. Maybe electric shock.
Too many kids on Ritalin. Matt.
I'm just saying. But aren't there examples where
maybe there's too many kids on Ritalin? He just said, maybe there's too many kids on Ritalin. And Tom Cruise stops him. Too many kids on Ritalin. Like, do you hear what you're saying? Ritalin is a street drug.
Tom Cruise sounded crazy back then.
And everyone, remember that interview when Tom Cruise looked like the lunatic? Who would have thought Tom Cruise would be back on top as an A-list war propagandist? And Matt Lauer would have been banished to Cuomo Island. Who would have thought?
A bald disgrace.
All right, there's more to this.
Works. Matt, you're glib. You don't even know what Ritalin is. If you start talking about chemical imbalance, you have to evaluate and read the research papers on how they came up with these theories, Matt. Okay? That's what I've done.
So he keeps bringing up a chemical imbalance. He goes, you have to read the research papers to know what they're... He's committing a mortal sin. He's doing his own research.
Yeah.
He's actually reading.
You're supposed to be glib.
And you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to be glib and just repeat what Big Pharma says.
Hey, maybe speed's bad for kids, but
that's what Matt Lauer was saying. Hey, maybe street.
Maybe.
Here we go.
And you go and you say, where's the medical test? Where's the blood test that says how much Ritalin you're supposed to get?
It's very impressive to listen to you because clearly you've done the homework and you know the subject.
And you should. And you should do that also because just knowing people who are on Ritalin isn't enough. You should be a little bit more responsible in knowing
I'm
really...
not prescribing Ritalin, Tom, and I'm not asking anyone else to do it.
Well, you're saying no,
I know some people who seem to have been helped.
But it's like, this is a very important issue.
This is a very,
and you know what? And you're here on the Today Show.
Right.
And to talk about it in a way of saying, well, isn't it okay, and being reasonable about it when you don't know, and I do. I think that you should be a little bit more responsible in knowing what it is because you communicate to people.
But you could have put that today about vaccines, COVID, lockdowns, natural immunity. You could do that all day long, and regular people know more about it than the news people, and regular people know more about it than a lot of the doctors do because regular people are actually reading the papers. They're actually reading the research papers. So like when I went in to see my neurologist and I brought up the fact that I was vaccine injured, he didn't know anything about it. And by the way, didn't want to. He didn't want to. Didn't want to know anything about anything.
That's the most glib part of all.
And here is Tom Cruise, who actually read up on psychotropic drugs, and he says He's talking about there is no chemical imbalance. And I remember when I saw this, I thought Tom Cruise was crazy because
Jimmy, I'm
I
blown
was
away. I remember thinking, what a maniac, Tom. But they didn't play the whole thing like this.
No.
They played, he was mean to Matt. He made Matt Lauer feel uncomfortable.
Yes. And I remember thinking Tom Cruise was off of his nut because I was on one of those drugs at the time. I was on Lexapro.
Oh.
And I thought that if I stopped taking it, I would die. You know, I would freaking want to kill myself. And turns out he was right. Well, why am I talking about that interview? Well, because of this. This is a new paper, a new study, The Serotonin Theory of Depression, a systematic umbrella review of the evidence. So they did a systematic umbrella review of the evidence. And who were they? These are researchers from the University College London. They conducted what they call an umbrella review of past meta-studies, and they did systematic analysis of depression's relationship to serotonin activity, and it included tens of thousands of participants. I think that comes from the Hill. So here it is from this paper. It says, our comprehensive review of the major strands of research on serotonin shows there is no convincing evidence that depression is associated with or caused by lower serotonin concentrations or activity. That's exactly what Tom Cruise was just saying. He was saying there is no chemical imbalance. And now this paper is proving it.
I've heard other people say it and thought they were kooky for saying it. I've heard other people say that there's no chemical imbalance.
I thought for sure it was. So most studies found no evidence of reduced serotonin activity in people with depression compared to people without. And methods to reduce serotonin availability using tryptophan depletion do not consistently lower mood in volunteers. So when they got rid of the serotonin artificially, when they did that, they lowered people's serotonin levels. It didn't lead them to have a bad mood. So they're saying there isn't a connection between serotonin and mood. That's what they're saying, and that there's no evidence of that people with reduced serotonin is present in people with depression. Just what Tom Cruise was saying 17 years ago. Tom Cruise, almost 2 decades out in front of the rest of the goddamn medical profession. Oh my God, did he do his own research? Did he actually read? You're not supposed to read in this post-Trump era. It's bad if you read. You're just supposed to listen to other people, like Rachel Maddow and Dr. Fauci. Complete corrupt criminals. And Matt Lauer.
Come in, make yourself comfortable. Let me hit this button and lock the door.
What I always thought was funny about Scientology's vendetta against psychiatry is that Scientology, they weren't wrong about the history of psychiatry. Right. They just can't believe that an industry can get away with that much, and they get so much flack for body thetans.
Like, they have a museum dedicated to the horrors of the psychiatric industry.
Yes.
And the museum is accurate.
It is, and it's on
Even
Hollywood
critics
Boulevard.
of Scientology will say that.
Yes. The chemical imbalance theory this is from the study. The chemical imbalance theory of depression is still put forward by professionals, and the serotonin theory in particular has formed the basis of a considerable research effort over the past few decades. The general public widely believes that depression has been convincingly demonstrated to be the result of serotonin or other chemical abnormalities, and this belief shapes how people understand their moods, leading to a pessimistic outlook on the outcome of depression and negative expectancies about the possibility of self-regulation of mood. So I think what this is saying, this is my pothead comedian interpretation of this, is that because people have this belief that has been given to them by Big Pharma, it now affects them to the point where they're going to have a negative mindset about that they'll ever be able to self-regulate their mood without a drug. So it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you make someone believe this thing, then they're going to believe it, and it's going to have a bad outcome.
Yeah.
You know, the only reason that they stopped doing lobotomies was because they found that drugs could do it.
Yeah, that's true. When they invented those antipsychotics.
Yes.
That's when they finally stopped with lobotomies.
So the idea that depression is the result of a chemical imbalance also influences decisions about whether to take or continue antidepressant medication and may discourage people from discontinuing treatment, potentially leading to a lifelong dependence on these drugs. This review suggests that the huge research effort based on the serotonin hypotheses has not produced convincing evidence of a biochemical basis to depression. This is consistent with research on many other biological markers. We suggest it's time to acknowledge that the serotonin theory of depression is not empirically substantiated. This is now 30 years later. 17 years after Tom Cruise blew the whistle on this, finally, science is coming around to tell you. So you know how they came to this conclusion? You know how they came to this conclusion? They didn't trust the science. They didn't have faith in the science. You know why? Because they're actual scientists, and they know that you don't trust science. You don't have faith in science. You question science. And that's what they did. And people who questioned it were called crazy. And now it's confirmed. Just like you were crazy if you thought the virus came from a lab. Just like you were crazy if you thought Fauci was lying. Just like you thought it was crazy if you thought vaccines could hurt your immune system. You're crazy. You question science. You don't have faith in science, and you certainly don't trust it. It is always difficult to prove a negative, but I think we can safely say that after a vast amount of research conducted over several decades, there is no convincing evidence that depression is caused by serotonin abnormalities, particularly by lower levels of reduced activity of serotonin. Who said that? The guy who was the lead author of that study.
Or the woman.
Oh, Joe, I'm sorry. You're right. Woman. Sorry. Thank you, Kurt. Oh, my God. I almost got canceled. Joanna Moncrief, the study's lead author. Look at that. Lady getting out of the house, huh?
It wasn't chemical. She just needed to get out and do some studies.
Not empirically substantiated. So that means when you see when it says it's not empirically substantiated, that there's no data to back up this stuff. That's what they're saying. And this idea that everyone has gone with for as long as I can remember, there's never been any freaking data to substantiate this. Is this how everyone felt when it turned out that lobotomies weren't medicine?
I wonder if it was all at once.
You mean we shouldn't cut out their frontal lobes?
Do you think big lobotomy was like, let's like ease off lobotomies, like with hydrocarbons?
Big lobotomy. But there are still people out there. This was today on Twitter. Why, no, you don't have to hand it to Tom Cruise for his bat crazy thoughts on medication. What was bat crazy about it? They're still doing it. Isn't that amazing, Kurt?
Dude, Adderall and Ritalin, I don't remember him even saying that in the old one. I'm blown away because that's obviously, when he goes to street drug, that's back when I was trying to get it as a street drug.
Yeah.
Like,
well, look, listen to these people. This is amazing. Why, no, you don't have to hand it to Tom Cruise for his bat crazy thoughts on medication just because he's sitting across from disgraced and enabled abuser of women Matt Lauer in an edited clip. Stop and think before you smash tweet. Well, Andrew Donaldson, I think the moron is you in this situation because of your knee jerk to go along with the crowd and your inability to think for yourself or even to analyze what you just saw.
You're glib is what you are. Tom Cruise called it.
That's right. Another one right underneath, and now a nice lady does it. She says, if you're now defending Tom Cruise for his anti-science views, What was anti-science about his views? You mean he read the science papers and he knew more about it than you and Matt Lauer combined? You mean that? And it turns out he was right? Turns out he's right. There was never any
defend
science.
democracy.
What's that?
Hashtag defend democracy.
Yeah.
I'm just...
If you're now defending Tom Cruise for his anti-science views, please note that polio has returned for the first time in 100. She's blaming Tom Cruise for polio returning. What does that have to do with Tom Cruise telling you that psychotropic drugs are harmful to children? What does polio have to do to that?
Yeah, really.
People just like to pull shit out of their ass to just hate on someone that the group told them to hate. So they were told on Twitter to hate Tom Cruise, and so they did. And nothing that they say makes any sense whatsoever. They're just but look at the people liking it though. This guy got 80 likes. So it just goes to show you, people like to be moron in unison.
Well, that's what Twitter is for.
That's what it's for. Polio vaccine was, so then someone responded, hey, polio vaccine was back in the day when vaccines were really vaccines. Back then, only radicals would deny an effectiveness of a vaccine. This fiasco, government and big pharma deals, has obliterated trust most people had in vaccines and their legitimacy.
But he also didn't look up polio vaccines because there was no radicals who were against it. It was a new thing. The big pharma company screwed up the first batch.
That's right.
And got people, and that was the birth of not trusting it, which I never knew about until very recently. I don't think people know about.
Right. I don't think people know about that either.
I got it when it was perfected like 20 something years later, you know?
Well, there was a batch of polio vaccines that got out that were not right.
They they accidentally somehow got live polio in it instead of like the dead amount of virus. I can't remember the name of the company, but this was an article, once again, that was kind of going at Trump because he said we're going to have a terrific vaccine ready in a few months.
Yeah.
And they were like, not so fast. We got to take it, be careful.
Yeah.
And it was because Trump was pushing the vaccine.
So when Trump was president and pushing the vaccine, you were allowed to be vaccine skeptical then. And they were. We showed you how Joanne Reed on MSNBC, she did a whole segment on you got to be skeptical of the vaccines. And if Trump pushes it, I ain't taking it, as Kamala Harris said.
I'm taking horse paste.
That's right.
If they say take it, I'm getting horse paste.
So research. Oh, that's it. Okay. So that's the whole thing. So it turns out Tom Cruise was right.
I'm genuinely shocked how when I watched it, I was like, this doesn't sound so crazy what he said.
It doesn't sound crazy at all what he said. But they made at the time I thought he was. And that's what makes me realize, well, so when people see a clip of me, yeah, and someone tells them I'm being anti-vax and crazy, they believe it. Yeah, you just like I believed it about Tom Cruise until I had to go through my own experience with Big Pharma, and now I know he was right. And by the way, now he's by the same fucking science confirms what he said 17 years ago.
Also,
go ahead.
He looks better than all of these people at age 60 or whatever.
Yeah, he's sick. Look what Matt Lauer looks like now compared to what he...
Yeah.
Tom Cruise looks basically the same. Matt Lauer looks like he just went through chemo.
He looks like Robert Schimmel now.
Yeah, he looks like Robert Schimmel. Matt Lauer should have been getting hair plugs back then. That's what you got to attack it early. 2005. You can't let it go, and or you're going to look like he looks. Now this is I'm writing a new book. It's called The Advice for the Shallow. And what I'm telling you is get your hair plugs early.
That is shallow.
But I bet if I wrote a book like that, it would be a bestseller.
Yeah.
Kurt, let's write a book like that.
Maybe you could just start selling it now.
I'll help you write a book, Advice for the Shallow.
Can we pre-sell? We could do pre-sales like Jenk did of a book he never wrote.
Let's check that book out.
I understand he's actually written it. That there's like a date now for it to be released.
Oh.
Yeah. He's such a clown. Selling a book he hasn't written.
It's called "We're Coming for You" or something.
Then they got the nerve to say that I'm the money grubbing grifter. He's selling a book he never even wrote for fucking money. Holy shit! Come see our stand-up comedy. We'll be in Los Angeles, Bakersfield, Indianapolis, Louisville, Cincinnati, Tulsa, Oklahoma City, Detroit, lots more. Go to jimmydorecomedy.com for a link for all our tickets.